So we'll deal with those 3 items now, and then we will return back to the chairman's, in this case the deputy chairman's update, and the chief executive's update, and then we'll go into minor items to finish our day off. The way we started.
Just an apologies, from the old fella Polder.
Yes, no, we got it. Yeah. He's onto it. He's onto those old fellas. So with that, we can hand over to you, Chris.
Yep, excellent. Thank you very much. So I've got Keiko here. Keiko's a terrestrial ecologist with the Regional Council. And really just to introduce this work. So of course, my name's Chris Dolly and I'm the Group Manager for the Asset Management Group. We operate a number of flood control and drainage schemes across the region. And it was really to point out that as part of those operations, we do all those operations under our environmental code of practice, and particularly for our 3 main river stems of the Ngāraroto, Turakuri and Tukituki, we have a site-specific or river-specific environment enhancement plan that we work to. And so those plans have systematically looked at the cultural values, the ecological values of those river systems, and we have a plan to enhance and support those values going forward. So this is the Māori committee. One thing of note is we do look at cultural values and tangata whenua values in these documents, but some of the plans around executing enhancement of those values aren't there. In the Turakuri, for example, any actions around those are absent, but I can remind everyone of the work that we've particularly done up at the Wairoa River, identifying the cultural sites and building protection of those sites into our work program up on that river. So it is a moving feast, and these sorts of documents get regularly reviewed and improved as we go. This particular one is from 2017, so it's up for review in the next couple of years.
I suppose, does that, just a quick comment, does that involve the hapu tutai, because you said tutai kiri, so is the tutai kiri hapu management plan involved in that document? It's part of the basis of, when you do this.
So there was, when this was produced, there was consultation, and when it's reviewed, there'll be consultation. So as to whether the specific current hapu management plan is embedded in here, I'll have to get back to you on that, look at the detail.
Yeah, I think it's, and we discussed it earlier when we talked about the hapu awa management plans, and I just picked up the point you said that Tutai Kiri hadn't, there is a plan in place, and that was done through marae years ago. So it'd be an important part of when you're doing that effectiveness of management to have that in part of the strategy.
Absolutely, I agree. So that's an area that we'll expand on in the future. So I just wanted to point that out, given the
perhaps
audience.
Just as a reference point through the chair, so you referenced in terms of the research that have been done up at Te Awa Wairau. You'll notice on screen there we have both Uncle Bill and Kataraina, who was a key part of that research piece.
So look, this really is a good news story, so I won't steal Keiko's thunder, but obviously as part of this plan, one aspect is how we manage around our bird life on the rivers, and many of our activities are restricted around the behaviours of those birds, etc. So I'll let Keiko do the presentation, and then we're happy to take any questions around that.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone. So I am going to talk about the Braided River bird census, or a survey in this case. So as Chris mentioned, this Ecological Management and Enhancement Plan, or EMEP for short, enables us to achieve this quite important dual responsibilities. One is to protect the community from the flooding event while safeguarding the ecosystems, and in this case it's the Braided River ecosystems. The EMEP has 2 parts. One's the ecological management part, and another is the enhancement part. And it's this ecological management part that provides a set of rules for the asset management group to comply with. And it is around the herbicide applications along or around the waterways to avoid any adverse impacts of herbicide application into the aquatic and terrestrial lives. There's a set of rules around avoid or mitigate the weed spread, such as the maintenance of the heavy machines. And there's some sort of extra rules around value-specific management zones, such as the whitebait spawning sites and some specific bird breeding sites that's been identified in the past. But the most stringent of all is a set of rules around the protecting the river birds. And more specifically, for example, we don't carry out any flood control activities during the peak breeding season of these river birds. If they have to carry out any operations on the either ends of the breeding season when the breeding is quieting down or just about to start, then we send an ecologist to survey the sections of interest to make sure that there's no breeding activities going on. We've been implementing this EMEP, particularly this set of protocols or rules since 2011, but what we hadn't done is monitoring of the effectiveness of ecological management protocols. And without this monitoring data, we are unable to carry out a pretty solid review based on the robust data. So we set out to do monitoring, and we have to measure the birds. But we're particularly interested in, the birds that are highly relying on the healthy Braided River system. Particularly these 4 species that you're seeing here, they require fairly clean, nice braided, the shingle beds to breed and forage or collect food. We commissioned a group of highly capable ecologists to survey the Tutakuri, Naruroro, and Tukituki and its major tributaries in 2019, November. That amounts to 262 kilometers in total. Just to clarify that we did count all the species encountered, so seen or heard, but we were particularly interested in the birds that have a high reliance on the actual riverbed. So due to the limited time frame that's given to this presentation, I'm just going to cover the results on the banded dotterel on the left, as a sort of as a measure of effectiveness. Just on the birds, this banded dotterel, fairly small birds, it weighs about 60 grams. They're unique to New Zealand, so there's nowhere else that you would see these birds on the planet except New Zealand. Global population 19,000. And just to put this into context, North Island brown kiwi, there are about 25,000 birds. So these birds are a lot scarcer in that context. They are declining at quite a worrying rate, 50% every 20 years, and therefore they are classified as threatened by the Department of Conservation. So that's about the birds. We were really pleased about our survey results. We counted 2,308 birds across 3 rivers, and this equates to 12% of the global population. And this figure puts Hawke's Bay rivers as officially the strongholds of this species in North Island. And there's actually a ranking of 120 braided rivers in New Zealand based on the banded dotterel counts. And this 2,300 number put rivers into fairly high in these rankings. Tukituki, Naruroro second and third, Tutakuri 12th. So this is already made a headline in the ornithological world, as you can imagine. So this was quite a significant find for us. The other bit that we were interested is the population trend. As I said earlier, these species were declining quite rapidly. This graph shows the banded dotterel counts on our 3 rivers since 1960s. And some years, such as 2014, not all the rivers were surveyed, and also the survey reaches are likely to vary amongst the years. So we need to take this as a conservative measure. But even with the conservative measure, there is no obvious population decline of the banded dotterel on our rivers, and that is despite the fact that it's declining elsewhere at a quite a high rate.
Kiko, can I just ask questions as you go along?
Yes.
Just as an observation, I just see that Tutaikuri through the years 93 to 2014, no counts. Any reason why?
Because first of all, we hadn't done the monitoring in a systematic way, and
So it was-
nobody had the resources to carry out this all three rivers in one go survey.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So that was, again, it was quite astonishing results for us. The other thing that we were now able to do from our data set and the way we designed the survey is to understand the spatial distribution of the species. This is just year one of the multi-year sort of survey, so this is a snapshot. But we can kind of dot the population densities per kilometre sections, for example, in order to understand the spatial distribution and hopefully some habitat preference. And we're starting to see this sort of preference or patterns for the banded dotterels, and we also did these kind of analysis for the other species, and eventually we might be able to discern the habitat preference differences amongst the species or the overlaps. So this is another sort of benefit of having robust data sets across all rivers. So it's hidden, but the preliminary conclusion we draw out of this survey is that our three rivers supporting quite a significant number of birds, banded dotterels, but also the other river specialists. Based on the population trend, we have now evidence to suggest that flood control activities under this current ecological management protocol have at worst neutral and at best positive impact on the Braided River birds. And that is, I would like to emphasize that this is the first ever tangible evidence in the country to suggest that flood control activities, when it's done right, have neutral or even positive impacts on the bird values. It's against the perceptions of some of our flood control activities, such as beach raking. And finally, and most importantly, we can now have confidently say that our ecological management protocols are achieving the outcomes that we set out to achieve, which is to protect the bird values and the integrity of the Braided River. So for next step for us is to repeat this survey. We need at least 3 years worth of data in order to remove any year-to-year variations and to get a more robust data. And then, as Chris mentioned, we will carry out the full review of the EMEPs. At the moment, we have this robust bird data set, so our review focus will be around the birds, but there's some obvious gaps in our implementation of the plan. So I'm sort of focusing the bird section will be definitely reviewed, as well as the other parts of the plan. And with this review, we continuously improve our EMEP. This is a living document. We'll do that continuously. And our EMEP, or ecological management, I should say, ecological management protocol is already one of the most robust and stringent in the country. But with this continuous improvement, I think we can become the model region when it comes to managing the Braided River and maintain the integrity of the special ecosystems. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Coco. Were there any questions for Coco?
Yeah, I just got a question in regards to the management plan and that. And, I brought up in Tūtaukuri. I remember in '86 you must have had the guy down there and he had a little tent thing. I remember throwing a rock at it and going, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he was doing the banded doctoral survey. Something you're not, you don't realise that you're a kid. And anyway, but the banded doctoral, because when we used to walk down the river, to make it out a broken wing, to take you away from the chicks and things like that. But I suppose just in the breeding seasons, do you think there'd be value in restricting, because they are vulnerable, like dogs and that, and I'm just talking about the Tūtaukuri awa, to help them breed? Because obviously it takes your dog down for a walk down the river, but then you've got the little chicks like you had on there. Is there value in that, do you think?
Hit it. I think it's a spot on comment that the birds will be benefiting from raising awareness and perhaps restricting some access and recreational use during the peak breeding season in particular, because as you said, these species are absolutely defenseless against the human to start with, but also dogs. So we are actually sort of attempting to do some sort of awareness exercise by putting out some signage during the breeding season and talking about that kind of, more focusing on the chicks' behavior and the adults' behavior, such as broken wing, etc., so that people starting to look for it instead of just driving, and hammering the shingle beach in the vehicle. I think it will take time in terms of changing the mindset of a mindset, but we are certainly trying to achieve that. So if there's any sort of innovative way to accelerate that, I think we're really open to any suggestions.
So signage, that's something you could do.
So education's always very beneficial. Often banning things is not so effective, and then we need to also the capability to follow up bylaws and fines, things like that. The other big piece of work that we will be embarking on shortly, after we look at the level of service that the Heritonga Plains flood control system is delivering, is actually a piece of work around the public use of rivers. So that's how people are accessing our river corridors. So the Regional Council directly controls, I think, 760 hectares of riparian land along those river networks. And so it's really having a clear plan on which areas of those we protect very heavily and lock people out almost, which areas we promote for some recreation, like motorcycling and thing that currently does happen. So have a better plan around some of those activities, and also an education plan around where we have more of those passive recreation values, which is walking and cycling, keep to the path or whatever. So that's a big piece of work that's coming up that will require a lot of consultation. It was commenced a few years ago, but it is very important that we finish the level of service work, because that will help inform the future direction of any changes to our infrastructure. And we wouldn't want to come up with a plan around, destination areas, which then need to be re-engineered. So that's the order. We look at the flood level of service first, followed up by public use of rivers, where we can improve some of the access and provide dedicated areas for some of those uses that may not, enhance some factors around the rivers.
Charlie?
What actually is the approach that you use that makes it a Braided Rivers approach?
What approach?
Yeah.
So,
What do we take Braided Rivers to mean?
also, Braided River is a river that has many courses, and those courses can change, and it's creating those braids that you see in the river. So one of the important things to some of these birds is the fact that they have an island. And so some of our management activities is around beach raking. So without significant floods coming through, we can get vegetation growing in those islands. So those islands go from a rocky island, which is very useful for these birds to hide, because that's the terrain that they like. If we didn't beach rake, we get weeds, and then we get vegetation, and then we get a vegetated island. So particularly there's the beach raking is, it can be controversial. There's some members of our community who don't see it as being a constructive part of our river management, and I guess some of this work demonstrates that we're helping provide the environments that these birds live in.
I was just having a look at Braided Rivers as an approach to, like, in medicine it's a mix of Rongo Māori and Western medicine. And the Braided Rivers approach, I see it also is about Western science mixed with Mātauranga Māori. So I'm just asking, what is the Braided Rivers approach here? It's obviously just about a braided river that's got many pathways, and it's not actually consistent with what else is in the definition of a braided river, especially in regards to bringing a presentation to the Māori committee.
Yeah, well, so as I suggested earlier, as part of our plan managing those rivers, there's many aspects that we look at. Today wasn't to go through all of those aspects. If you would like us to come back and talk to you about all the aspects, we can. This was really highlighting I think some recent news, which we thought was quite beneficial to hear around the birds. And we also know that we have done a lot of work around cultural values and the like, tangata whenua values, but these plans are pretty light in supporting those. So that's work
Yeah,
that
like
we need to
Mahina Kai and fish pastures and that sort of stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
And when you talk about braided, and I did do some work years ago with Gary, and that in regards to that braided, and taking the shingle off, and you go through and you scrape the tops and that, and then just the effects, because there was huge issues around. And we talked about it this morning about watercress and inanga no longer being plentiful when we were kids, because we used to do that all the time. You go to the river and get some inanga and go and pick watercress, but then you just don't see it now. And pied stilts, we used to see them all the time, and it just seems very limited from when you were, and you only take that as anecdotal evidence when you're growing up, and then you look back and think, oh geez, don't see that anymore. So yeah, how that fits in with that braided approach, and then that Mātauranga Māori approach as well, because that's how we measure, and we're just saying simple measures for our whānau is when they go and pick some watercress, because hey, they can go down the river and pick some watercress, but I think it's replaced now with that duckweed, because you get all that duckweed, and well, you can't eat that with pork bones. But that, as a simple explanation, because that's what they say, hey, no more watercress.
Gee, I've just got one. Just an example around educational stuff, for our tamariki rangatahi. Maybe the next thing that you put up, give us some ideas on what you perceive as important for us around as Māori for Mahinga Kai, and how things can operate here in Heretaunga ki, the area of this, how it might all look, because, there's a lot of those rivers there that used to have some wonderful eels. And 30 years ago, they were wonderful. Today, there's none. I'm happy about the birds because I'm a Mahinga Kai fella. I like eating things. So I'm just being, be good to see that, what we could be doing in the future, too. I mean, the cultural birds, a small thing for me, but from a cultural perspective, when I serve up on our marae at Kauranaki, we want to know there's still eels there. I'm not criticising your work. I'm just giving you a baseline from a cultural perspective. That's all. Kia ora.
Rick?
I'd just like to come back to the point here. Two things. Firstly, I don't think we've been good as we should have at communicating what our expectations are. I think that's the point to make here. So you can't expect the public to behave in a way we haven't told them how to behave. So I'm really keen on a comms plan about this, about what this. The other thing I would say to you is that we should be aiming at the kids rather than the adults, because they drive behaviour. So they'll be the ones who will say, "Hey, Dad, do you think you should be doing that? Is this appropriate?" That's what I think is aimed at the kids. That's what it is. I'm mindful of this when it came to having seatbelts in cars. All the advertisement of the Land Transport Authority was at the kids, make it click. So when you got in the car, kids told you your seatbelt on. They were the police force and they sit in the car. So I think that's what we have to do. The other thing too is that just because you have a right to walk on a river doesn't mean to say you have a right to tear it up with a four-wheel drive.
Sure.
And I just think we have let that slide. I just see so many places where people think they've got a right to drive over dunes, rip up other things. And I think we have to be able to make it clear that this isn't a right that you have. But having said that, I do feel we haven't actually helped people. I'm mindful we've, after some time, agreed to a motorcycle track at Mary Road, I like your idea of finding other places around there where we can say, right, you want to rip the place up? Here's where you do it. This is this place here, and leave everybody else alone. If we don't have that, we're not going to change behaviour. So, could you come back to us with a plan of how you might improve all these things? Comms about what we want to do to people. I think the council really support it.
So we'll work through something, and so we can come back more around the more breadth and depth around the plan, or we can focus on the harvesting food aspect. So maybe I'll have a chat with Pele, and we can design a suited future presentation.
Michelle?
Kia ora, just thinking about the kai. So first of all, from the information you gave us, fantastic. When you see it's declining in other parts of the country, it says that we must be doing something right. I hear what the whanaunga is saying about, it would have been good to know how the life within the river are coping, especially our tona, which is one of our main resources. And agree with what Rick's saying about those engaging with the tamariki. I just got to remember I stood in front of kids and we were campaigning on getting rid of shopping bags in Wairoa, and I stood in front of a primary school there, and I was holding the new wheel bag that we use now, and I said, so why don't we use this plastic bag, tamariki ma? And they go, 'cause it'll hurt the turtles' fire, and what are you going to tell your parents? Well, they went home and told them, you get 50 cents at the moment, mum and dad, buy these and move away from plastic. And this whole big movement happened nationally, and we got rid of it. But I do agree with the comms. From a Mātauranga Māori perspective, when is the nesting time?
Yeah, true.
When is the
Breeding
nesting
season,
time?
breeding.
Because from a Mātauranga Māori perspective,
Breeding.
it's about perhaps when you talk about certain sections of the river, it's about putting a rahui on there. He's putting a rahui on there to protect them, and that's where we come in. And you go out and educate our people, our tamariki, so that they're the future environmental soldiers, but also about we can help that way in our own, with our own kaupapa, which is putting a rahui in that area. But you got to look at when it happens, because we may be whitebaiting or something else. So you've got to team up.
So the current period's, I think, over February. So there's
February.
there's some dates in here.
Big swimming month.
But I mean, like, you don't want people driving up
It's
and
about,
smashing
they're
it.
starting to breed or try to breed from any time from September through to February.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the peak season in Hawke's Bay at this point in time, and it might change because of climate change, is the November, December, January.
Well, that's the end of the wet bathing season.
Yeah. Kiko, I was just interested in the comment you made about the flood control and the impact from a negative to a positive range. Can you just kind of broaden that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I meant. So what we are specifically interested is, if, for example, first of all, if this avoidance or exclusion period when we stop doing the control in order to avoid the breeding birds are actually making difference, and that is where the counts and the trend is informing us. Because we've been doing the beach raking, for as long as
A long time.
a long time. Sorry, I just don't have specific years. The other thing is why then, particularly in South Island, the birds are declining. And there's one study done on looking at the bird density, bird abundant population in the weed cover on the Braided River, because the weeds are prominent issues across the country on the Braided River. So the survey identified the trends being increasing rather than decreasing or plateaued. So that means avoidance in one way or the other are actually not having a difference, and by avoiding those peak seasons and doing the beach raking and the gravel extractions outside of breeding season having neutral
Okay.
or positive impacts on the
Oh,
bird
okay, yep.
population. And the other thing we are now managed to do analysis on is the comparing where we do beach raking and not beach raking and compare the bird density. And there is a positive correlation between, so meaning where beach raking occurs on Tukituki, the birds number are higher. Naruroro, there was no difference. So Naruroro, I think it's because it's been raked and it's reasonably clean, the beach raking presence absence didn't seem to make much difference on the bird number. But Tukituki, there's a distinctive segments that have been raked and not raked, and the birds number are a lot higher where it's been raked. So this is the evidence that suggests that the raking, if it's done right, because we can't just rake when the bird's actually breeding, but our way of beach raking seems to have positive impacts at best on the birds. So that's
amazing.
what I meant by, and that's where we can now have evidence that to those people who think the beach raking is just pure bad, in that, or if it's done right, we have to emphasize that if under strict ecological management protocols, it can be positive.
You'd know that, I mean, over the last few years, Chris, if you've just kept an eye on the behaviour of rivers, we haven't had the consistency of about 4 big floods over the year. It's been quite less. But this is quite interesting in my mind, thinking, oh, crux, I got the beach raking in there. It's disturbing stuff. It's upsetting the likes of bird population. But you can now say, no, actually we can validate the information based on the data and quite the other way around. So.
I have to point out, however, that this is looking at the effectiveness in relation to our flood control activities. We are not looking at the predation, for example, impacts on the bird life, and it's inevitably going to be the most severe impacts on the
But
bird.
it's only one contributing factor, and then whenever you look at data, you've got to go a little bit wider. So what you're saying, but there may be some other factors that come in with
underlining factors.
Yeah, because I've had the call, people rang me about the raking and weren't supportive, and they've said their theories, and then you listen to what the kōrero, and it's not a natural, apart from a flood coming through. So yeah, I don't know. You just got to look at all the equation and weigh that up, because there might be other factors.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I should always defer to committee members, but
Followed by Heather White.
I just wanted to pick up a point which was well made this morning, and that was about the convergence at some point in the future of Mātauranga Māori and Western science.
Exactly.
And I think reflecting on that, there'll come a point, I think, where we have the right people, this forum is a good example, where we can strengthen what's in there around tikanga Māori, around cultural values, around cultural indicators. And it would be good at some point, ko te ingoa tūturu nei mo te manu nei, uncle, he tūturi waka, tūturi whatu. And for Braided Rivers, he awa whiria. So it'd be good at some point in the future to start to see these reflections off the back of the convergence of Western science and Mātauranga Māori.
Kia ora. Just based on this presentation, I just want to commend those protocols that put in place the focus of biodiversity enhancement, because that's a key part of enhancing Māori. And it's one part, there are interconnected other parts of enhancing Māori, but to show that you've used a certain protocol to enhance that population is a big win, I think. But then when you step away and look at the broader picture of enhancing Māori, we've sort of dealt with, I suppose, Te Waunui Atani, so the bird life. But now we need to connect up. Tangaroa, what are the protocols, what's happening in the water and the life within the water. So thank you for that snapshot. And then I think we need to have a broader kōrero around enhancing Māori for all our awa.
Cool.
So kia ora.
Are there any further questions? I just have one for you. I have a couple for you, Koko. So you spoke about the one variety of bird life, but there are 3 other varieties there. do we see similar outcomes for those other three varieties?
We can say the similar trends for two other species. The third species, which is the black-billed gull, which is the rarest, we can't say that as yet. The black-billed gull, they are critically threatened, even more threatened than any other species that are there. We just couldn't predict where they turn up. They seem to just turn up and then washed away by the flood or high tide and then reappear elsewhere. And it's been really hard to trace the trend. We thought they used to be, quite regularly breeding on the river, but they haven't been doing that for the last 5 years. They seem to be using the coastal environment. So slightly, it's outside of the scope of the MEP program, but that's the answer for now.
Okay. So, and the other part to that question was there overlapping in regards to population points?
Population.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes, there was. In terms of two of those little dotterel species, but as you saw on the map, it's quite
Yes.
extensive. So we haven't really narrowed down to where exactly, but places like Lower Tukituki, Lower Naroro, Tutaikuri was consistent. They all seems to support multitude of species that are doing, preferring that. But one species that I hadn't covered seems to like a bit more channelized, but requires mud flats on the side of the river, whereas the banded dotterel and those oyster catcher, they just need a shingle, big shingle. So I think it might emerges that they actually might separate, but the lower part is just really fertile, productive, close to the coastal mud flats, etc. That seems to be the hotspots for many things.
And one point just to add, it'd be good with the reforestation programs that are going on the rivers at the moment with replanting and that to look at introducing other bird species. I know we've got tui that come over, feed around, and it'd be good if that was interconnected when you're looking at that, but for future growth, that some of those feed trees and that I don't know if it's connected, most probably is, but it's most probably a point to look at those other species and then encourage them to breed, because if they got kai, they'll eat that kai and then they'll breed.
Yeah.
So as we go through this big PGF project and replanting and then riparian planting to look at some of those tree species, because that'll increase the tui and other species.
Corridor of trees, eh?
Yeah.
So certainly a lot of that's covered in this plan. It's around identifying biodiversity hotspots and looking after those, and it's around getting more natives into our river corridors. So a lot of that is happening sort of under this plan as well.
So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Koko. Can I have a motion and a second to receive the report, please? Thank you, Ahuriri, Peter and Api. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you.
Thanks very much for that, guys. Strategic plan, come down to strategic plan? Kerry?
Just as Kerry's coming up, Desiree, she rang in this morning and she's caught a bug off her husband. And so she rang in sick. She was otherwise going to be presenting. And just to save my bacon, Kerry has stepped in to lead the discussion on this paper of the strategic plan.
Kia ora koutou. Yes, so thank you for putting up with me because, like Peter's just mentioned, this is Desiree's paper, so I will do my best. It's an information paper to you all just on the strategic plan, which was adopted on the 24th of June. As I understand it, Desiree came to you all back in March and ran a bus stop workshop, which I believe was very successful. And as the paper indicates, this is a refresh of the strategic plan that we had previously, which ran for the 2017 to 21 period. And the reason why it was seen important to have the refresh was because, of course, we had the new council and new members for the Māori committee.
Page 25.
Beg your pardon?
Right.
Oh. So Desiree set out here if you move on to paragraphs 8.1 through to 8.9, the key changes that have been brought through to this new strategic plan. And it seems that there are obviously a number of points that were raised through the Māori Committee which have been adopted, which is great. And 8.6, I think, is specifically referencing kaitiakitanga and that role of tangata whenua throughout the strategic plan, making that more explicit. And I think that one of the key points that you had made to her was not to have climate change as a separate pillar, but to make sure that that was infused throughout the other 4 pillars. So yes, this is just an information item to you all, but if you have any questions, I will do my best to help you.
So the strategic plan, does it go out for public consultation?
No, so this was just a refresh. So this has been adopted and is available to the public now. It's on our website, and it looks like that on the front cover, which you've probably all have in your papers.
And I think on 8.6 around kaitiakitanga, because we had an in-depth discussion this morning, I don't think you were here, but obviously about a lot of mahi that needs to be done, and we had some action points that come out of that conversation that, I know it's not your area and you're just filling in, but obviously it's a bigger discussion that's got to happen in regards to, so it's good, it's in the strategy. Obviously the strategy is only as good as implementation and then the operationalisation of the plan. And I think that's what that's one of the points I got from this morning about, and we all do strategic documents, but obviously it's implementing the strategy and getting the value out of strategies. So, kia ora.
Any further questions?
I forgot to add, Chair, in my introduction that Kerry is our Acting General Manager of Strategy and Planning.
Oh, okay.
Well, no doubt see you again then, Kerry.
Did you receive the paper? Can I have a mover and a second to receive the paper? Henny White and Mare, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Kia ora, thank you. Thank you. Right, so we can go back to our reports. Rick, does you want to give us an update in regards to Deputy Chair?
Regards to what?
You-
Do the chair?
Perhaps I can add to this, Chair. Rex had given an apology. It has been course in the past for the Chair and the Chief Executive to provide a progress update in terms of how HPRC is going. That said, I can actually lead with a number of items that James has passed through to me,
Well,
to which you
that.
might be able to add.
You do that and I'll follow on. I'll play your wingman.
Play your wingman.
You might get shot
You've
down.
had a heads up, you've got a prior plan, so.
Right.
Thank you. Is that okay, Chair?
Yes, that's fine, happy.
So in front of you, you'll have it's probably the only coloured document you've got in front of you.
Colour one.
It's a 2-pager, and on there I've summarised key points. James gives his apology for this morning. He's taken some well-needed annual leave, but in doing so he hasn't forgotten an obligation to this committee to provide an update on where things are at. So Annalee's going to put it up on the screen. I'm sorry, Uncle Bill Kataraina, if you don't, I think that was sent to you this morning, and you may well see this through a shared screen. I'll try to skip through it, and so we can get to any questions that you might have. Here we go. So you'll see it both on the paper in front of you and certainly up on the screen. What I'll do is I'll just jump into key points and I'll keep moving forward. Stop me if you've got any questions along the way. That doesn't anticipate I'll be able to answer them, but I'll certainly take note of them. So this one here, James is indicating that we've returned back to normal service following COVID lockdown. And just as a point of interest, he put on a special day, he and the executive leadership team, last Friday, just to acknowledge and thank staff unilaterally for having got us through that period of lockdown. Our services didn't fail nor take a huge dip through that period of time. And so it was James and certainly on behalf of the councillors and the executive to say thanks to the staff, to acknowledge them. Our CDM, that's Civil Defence Emergency Management Welfare Response, that's wound right down, and the focus now with central government leaders around foreign nationals that are stranded here, and trying to rest the CDM team in the advent that something else might come up. Next slide, please, Emily. Oh, I don't know how to use that. You take it with you. Take it with you, Emily. I'm dangerous with something like that. So our current priorities, which is around the annual plan consultations, submissions closed last week. I'll let you just meander your way through the rest of that. Clear majority of submitters support holding the rates at current levels for the next year and creating a 1 million recovery, which had been set aside originally for new accommodation for council staff. The next point. Oh, no, not the next slide.
Sorry.
Yeah, 2021-31 long-term plan. That's in process at the moment. Kerry was probably the best one to have stayed behind for that. And that's focused, and you would have been part of a Zoom session on the 14th of April where we introduced climate smart recovery, and that was led by Tom Skirman on that day. And good support from all those from both RPC and also from Māori Committee in regards to that.
So just in regards to the long-term plan, and Kerry, we brought up about kaitiakitanga and that, and we brought it up this morning. Obviously, that change within the plan when we go through and kōrero around that would may impact in the long-term plan, because we may have to make some changes, just so as long as we're aware.
And there'll be more opportunities and workshops for this committee and others to contribute to that.
Okay.
End of year finances and annual report, big focus at the moment. We've been awarded a contract for rebuild of the country's finance system. That's been long awaited. I've worked in organisations previously, and ours has been rather woeful, not because of the staff, more because of the legacy that we've been moving through. So that contract's been let out, and we're right in the throes of starting that up now. The other part that complements that is now we've got an up and running, full-blown finance team that sits in behind who are driving all of this. Policy and planning team, they're focused, as we discussed this morning, on tank and outstanding water bodies.
So that's a major, as in we discussed that in length and this morning, so obviously it's a major conversation that we still have to have because it was major discussion this morning.
And that's part of government's essential freshwater reform, which is most of that is online now. And we're still exploring changes on the technical fix for tuki in relation to the nutrient tables. Yeah. Thank you, Annalie. Consents team, it's the team that works under Liz Lambert. They're focused on new land use consents around the 280 farms in the tuki catchment and also in the Twyford area. Still working through the WDC, I think as we touched on this morning, wastewater consent process.
And I think Mate raised that about the huge amount of consents that are going through that Māori are having to deal with. And if you go back to last year when we brought up from Naitahu, that rupu as a potential example of how Māori can work better in that space, it'll be most probably good to follow up on that on that hui to see what's being formulated in a plan to potentially work in that area.
So a very quick update. So the PSG Tātou Tātua Te Waira was grateful to Heretonga Tai Whenua to be able to, Heretonga pass that over for Wairau to pick up. So that's kicking ahead now under the leadership of Lewis and Autapu. Yep. So there'll be something that'll come online, because one of the action points from that hui down at Pukemukimuki was that we brought back together at some point in the near future to look at how that might gestate. So it's under action. Where are we up to? Oh yeah, NCC, there's an abatement notice in terms of the wastewater outfall, and also HDC for a leak in their sewer system down at Havelock North.
And I'll be honest, I was at an Napier City Council annual review plan, and I said from our tai whenua that we recommended that they get prosecuted for obviously just with the leaching, it would go through the process. So, it's about being upfront with people and letting them know. So for our tai whenua, I thought, we had discussed it here, so it was good to let them know our reasoning around why, and obviously around the pollution in Ahuriri. And I know they talk about, the plant that doesn't meet the current standard, but that doesn't solve the issue. And they said it's about cost, but I said if our whānau ain't swimming in there, we can't get kaimoana, there's an issue. Just so everyone's aware, because we need to own what we say and not say something and then don't own it when it gets to those situations where other people are involved.
So this is sitting with Liz Lambert and her team. Prosecutions at the end of the day are based on evidential sufficiency and on what's in public good.
They're saying, I see, noticed they missed the Wairoa District Council 2 meeting because they also had a fine with they discharged on an ingoing tide during the day accidentally for 2 hours. So yes, there was Napier, Hastings and Wairoa. Trifecta. For sewage.
And of course, prosecutions for burning, odour and effluent. I think someone mentioned last night.
Seen Rex on TV.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's in flow. We're in the peak of planting and fencing work with landowners under the ERS scheme and riparian planting. And I know this is a hot topic for all of you. But you were mentioning this earlier on, Peter, in terms of riparian.
Yeah, and I think it's great. It's great that we're returning our whenua and planting trees that are going to sustain our indigenous bird life. Awesome.
Yeah, just as we heard off the back of Keiko's cordial there. Sustainable Homes Scheme, it's ahead of budget, strong demand, but we're starting to reach the limits of the funding that's available for that scheme. And the last bullet point there, NZTA. We talked about Waka Kotahi this morning. Supporting HBRC and providing free bus services in HB, but the demand remains disappointingly low. Thank you, Annalie. Asset management, so this is Chris's team that was just here before, continuing with their work reviewing our flood schemes, including the coastal hazards strategy area, and the works group is continuing to play catch up on work delayed by COVID, which includes recent rainfall deluge that we've had and the impact that's had upon the river openings. And our science teams are back into full swing, finalising our 5 yearly State of Environment reports. Thank you, Annalie.
So can I just ask a question
Yes.
here? You've got a science team going on, is it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we've got a full science team which sits with our integrated catchment management team under the General Manager Ian Maxwell.
I just wanted to let the idea, Mare have been running a bit of a science program, and I think, the hook up between what Mare is doing and this lot's doing would be a good rub.
Yeah. So that connection's already in place.
Yep.
Yeah, and
how does it look like supportive-wise? So,
Well, I guess I could probably answer that, and a number of us around the table, including yourself, Rick, would have received reports, particularly around the Māori monitoring framework development. Of course, we've had relationships for the last 7 years, joint venture relationships with Otago University, and the main purpose of that, and it's to support the work that Zach does, is to keep our kids in the pipeline of education. We've got another exciting program that's coming up, and we're about to, and I've just got an email from Ian just asking where things are up to. We have been doing it on our own bat. We have been putting our own skin in the game, which is a little bit unfortunate because it's, resources that we've got to kind of go and flog or tag or raid from somewhere. Doesn't make things easy, but it's all in line with bringing that converging mātauranga and that Western science together. So it could do with a great bit of support, and I guess the annual plan and the LTP provides that space for us to make a push and a bid to it. But it's so fundamental to the continuum of keeping our kids in that pipeline of education. This is real time, using things that are locally, regionally, and of course it's going to benefit, got long-term benefits.
I think the other part to it is the measuring tool, which is from a mātauranga Māori perspective.
Yeah, well, here again, we're in an exciting space, and and part of probably the difficulty of advocating for change, particularly around plan changes, all these other things are going on in our kete, and it's really hard when you've got a major issue in front of you, and at the same time you're looking for a bit of support to develop, which is basically a regional outcome, and we're getting caught up with other little firesides that are going on too as well. But do imbue, and thanks for that, Zach, for actually saying, hey, this does need resource support. Anything you move needs resource, but look at the outcomes if we can just start to kind of get that conversation so that convergence does happen.
Well, especially if we've got our own scientists here on the ground, that we can implement some of our people in there, so we get that transformation going on.
So it'd be something perhaps that Rick might be able to add to or comment on later. But there's a particular theme or the strand or thread that's passing through all of this as we move into LTP, the next LTP, and that is, and it's even indicated in terms of the rates, no rates increase.
Yeah.
Is that we're moving into a very tight resource environment. It's more about either doing less with what we've got, or for us as general managers, in terms of helping to forecast the program of work ahead, is trying to look where we can be more efficient with that or stop doing certain things, because that's the environment that we're working into. This part here, COVID recovery, it's a shame really that I couldn't fit it in with the agenda, Chair, but Sarah Tully has just started with us as a regional recovery manager. She'll be working in close in terms of Matariki H-Breeds alongside the staff down at the business hub. We're hoping that we can get Matariki H-Breeds back up and running and on course. And Sarah will have a big part to play with that. You'll see up there that she came through with high recommendation from Deloitte. She's been there for quite some while. And actually one of her key managers and reference points was Lee Gray, who's one of the managers and partners of Deloitte's in the Māori part. We didn't receive any funding in terms of the weekend announcement of environment recovery projects. But there is some PGF that's still being processed through that, and we're having discussions with Ministry of Social Development in terms of the pipeline of unemployed workers. And I know recently we received some of those from Central Hawke's Bay that might match in terms of some of those programs of riparian fencing and the like.
And I suppose then we brought that out in the economic meeting that we had, I don't know, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's in it because obviously we've got Māori contractors that work within the different Māori entities, and then how we support them for their mahi and obviously employment and that, because if we look at the stats, Māori traditionally do bad, and in this current environment of COVID-19 they're going to even drop even lower. So how do we proactively engage to get them into those positions that traditionally a lot of Māori have worked in that fencing industry? So it's most probably quite an important topic. And just the COVID recovery, what we've found through when we're going through our marae debriefs is around databases, and that's what we'd like to see some support in. We ain't got a lot of money at our marae, but we've identified, hey, our databases need to be brought up, because obviously when you're doing food deliveries and packages and all of that, and some people are no longer with us and that, but it's getting someone to be able to go through now and create our data so it's more effective. So when emergency, we've got up-to-date contact details, and that's a learning that we've taken. So I'd hope in part of this COVID recovery package there may be a discussion around there, and I think that'd be for our marae, because you've got voluntary people working in the marae, but they don't keep your database up to date. And then even with meetings like this, we try and get our communications out, but you're not covering everyone. So that was a learning we've taken. It's most probably an important part of any recovery program.
Good point, Peter, because I was part of the GECC as we went through that lockdown process, and Hawke's Bay, and in particular cognizance of DHB and also with Tai Whenua, were very, very quick off the mark in terms of setting up the Tihei Mauri Order Centre for the welfare system, and that was all the way down from Paritu all the way down to Turakirai in terms of the Kahungunu corridor. So very, very good. But the database is a key point in amongst that. That last one there, okay, that one there then. Thanks, Emily. Substantial funding available for environmental projects. Allocation is likely to be delayed. We're dependent upon central government in terms of this. And our CEO has been appointed to the Reference Oversight Group, advising government on the 1.3 billion jobs billion jobs for nature program and current.
So how will that impact on our, because a lot of our trusts are ahi whenua trusts. I know Mare sat on trust, I sit on trust, and we're in the headwaters of the Mohaku and the headwaters of the Narororo, the Tuhituk. We're all at the headwaters, so what happens in the headwaters obviously comes down. So what supports, because we've all been hit in regards to tourism, because our income come from international tourists. no tourists. You know what I mean? And so we're stuck in a situation where we're trying to work through measures to generate income. So with this recovery package and working with those ahu whenua trusts, which are a huge part of the community and the economy, it'd be great to see some engagement with them.
At some key point in the future, I'd like to, with James' support, is to bring Sarah Tully in here as the Economic Recovery Manager, to bring her in here because hers will be a close connection with Matari Gauge Breeds. We need to get that up and working, which is one of the regulating points in terms of what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then I noticed we talk about forestry and that because those trusts are now looking at, hey, do we need to clear and plant? Yeah, I mean, because they've got to look at options, and it'd be a shame if they're it's a shame that they're looking at those options to generate income. So it's most probably a discussion that needs to be had. How do we support those Māori organisations within those environments?
Chair, that's an update on progress and also COVID and.
Rick, can we go to you, please?
Thank you for giving me a pause to reflect. Can I start a long way back and say that we think we need to reflect on how things have changed for the council. Quite some time ago, this regional council was operated very much on its own in a very narrow framework. It did the minimum it had to do, in my view. It didn't rock any boats. It didn't have an expansive view. It did things as quickly, as cheaply as it could. Everything was done to keep rates down to an absolute minimum. It was a minimalist organisation, in my view. And you hardly ever heard of it in any of the newspapers because it didn't have anything really worthy to report, actually. The thing has changed around dramatically, and you now have a council which has got a very expansive work program in a whole range of areas, is engaged in a much wider conversations across the regions. You just have to think about conversations we're having here on the range of topics we've got, and is setting different standards and making things quite a lot different. Now, take for example, in the environment area, we've got a lot of work going on to make sure that Plan Change 6 is embedded in with the farm plans. We've got a whole pile more people working on making sure that people have got their farm plans in place. We've got the tank in progress, and with the water reforms, we're going to have a lot more other things going on here. So the rate of work has increased dramatically, and the standard to which it's expected has increased dramatically as well. The government's making quite a number of reforms, like in the water area, fresh water, and then there's announcements happening today, as I understand, on the 3 waters, all of which is going to have some impact on it. So we've got this legislative change and standards change. Out of that, there's air quality issues coming along, and you know that the chair is leading the charge on fighting fires. So we've got those sorts of things zooming around the place. But in addition to that, we've got the regional council being really active in trying to mitigate the effect of COVID-19. I want to say that I think Hawke's Bay is going to be one of those areas that's not going to be the hardest hit as some other areas of New Zealand for a number of reasons. Firstly, we're not that dependent on international tourists as other places were, like Otago, Rotorua and so on. We do have tourists, but not, they're part of the mix, but not so. Also, we've managed to keep most of our industries running because we're producers of food and things that people want. So we've got this. So we need to build on that. So what the council via HBRIC is looking to do is to try and work with other partners, be it Nikki or the PSGEs, who's interested, in economic development opportunities to strengthen what we do here in Hawke's Bay, as well as protect ourselves, our assets which we have, because we do have funds to invest. So the question is, do we put them into generalised funds which spread all over the place, or do we do things more locally here which we can get to manage ourselves and get a better return? So this is a lot of thinking and work being done on this area here. And so we've got a really active council, and we're going through a lot of planning processes, and when they're coming up to the annual plan which we're going to be engaged in, we have set an objective to try and have a 0 rate increase, which means there's going to be some constraints on us, but on the other side of it, we still want to do all the things we want to do. We want to go and plant trees and do that. And we've got issues to deal with about water security in the long term. We all realise that in the future, water is going to be one of the most valuable commodities of all. So we need to make sure that we've got water. So how do we handle that? There's a lot of discussion to go on there as well. It's for coming back to the economic development. We're working very hard to try and help with the opportunity to put a horticulture into Wairoa. We've got that underway. We've got several other things underway. This is a very active council, and I'm actually really proud of the work it's done so far, including a lot of the work we've done in the environment. Like last weekend, Rex and I were out with a small group planting a pile of kahikatea in Hawke Park. We like doing these things. That's what we do. We like doing things to protect the environment. So we're at it at all levels: strategic development, economic development, looking at the waterways, doing work in the environment. So it's a multi-level, multifaceted organisation. And on some occasions, it seems almost bewildering what we do. But personally, I'm really proud of this council. I think it does a fine job. We had the function the other day at the up at the rugby club, and I thought it was a great feeling amongst the staff. There's a bright, capable, energetic group of people who want to give of their best, to do of their best. And I thought, well, we're pretty well placed. And then we've got supporters such as the Māori Committee and the through the PSGEs and so on. We've built really strong linkages across the community in all different directions. So I think we're in a pretty good place for the future, actually.
Kia ora. Ka pai. Chair, can we ask that the committee receives the report? From the Chief Executive and from our Deputy Chair.
So can I move on a second to receive the retrievable reports? Thank you, Api. Thank you, Uncle Hami.
And just one point in the report, because I did send it to Rex, because we didn't have put in our thing, was the concerns that have been raised by our hapu iwi members in regards to the closing of ahi for kaimoana, because in these times of COVID-19, and that's a pātaka kai to feed our whānau, and then we're telling them not, hey, no kaimoana, keep away, it is a major concern. And then when you read through the science and the information that backs it, because you do have correlation with nitrates and extra toxins within the water, so it is a major kōrero that's happening at the moment, and it's better to be aware than not aware, because it's hard to tell whānau when they want to go and get kai, hey, don't get any, because whether they listen to you or not, that's a call that they make. But I'm just making the council aware, since they manage that resource, the water. So that's mostly a conversation that we need to have at a later stages. I know it came up for our conversation this morning, but it's just a concern, because we're saying, hey, don't go down there, and they're saying, what? What are you telling us? Hey.
Charlie, did you need it away?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Kia ora,
Mr. Chair.
Charles.
Kia ora, Charles. Watch out for the potholes heading home.
Yeah, I reckon.
Watch out for the goats.
And loggy trucks.
Watch out for the goats.
Goats.
Okay, there's no on there too.
Oh, jeez.
So can I just have, so all those in favour of receiving reports, please? Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So can we just go to page 58 is the statutory obligations, statutory advocacy update. So that's just in regards to resource consents applications received. Any kōrero there? Standard?
I think the main kōrero, and we've already raised it, is the amount of consents coming through that Māori have to try. And I'm honest, I can't go through all those consents. I'd rather someone, that there was a body set up that I had faith in that could work with the council ever to go through that process.
Exactly.
And then we don't, because we're not giving it justice most probably, because we just haven't got the time to do it. So.
Time, resources, manpower.
Yeah. And then, of course, it's dependent on your kind of cultural insight, knowledge, where these things have rolled onto, and I guess the compromises or the side agreements, all those sorts of things that come into place, and then you have a change of face, and then the goodwill goes. You're back to zero.
Is it? I'm just anticipating here. Is it worthwhile, perhaps, HBRC, through the chair, approaching the PSG just to get a bit of an update in terms of where it's at and what the pathway looks like ahead in terms of the Mahanui Kura Taiao type concept?
So, tato, we're waiting. Is that the answer you wanted?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, it would be nice to have an update, because, as Peter's saying and Māori's saying, was just we are getting swamped and we're struggling.
Perhaps we'll draft a letter for your signature, Chair.
I'll be Michelle by then.
Okay.
But yes, we'll certainly do that.
I remember reading something, sorry, through Mr. Chair, there was and Papa Bill will know about this, the land at Mahia, was it Thompson's, with the manuka that was sprayed? I see it was still sitting in there somewhere. I know I read it the other day.
Or was that the Wairau consents?
Yeah. I don't think it's changed owners. It's the owner that they were, you know, he hadn't think the consent, supported the consent application. He's now sold up and someone else is in place, and the manuka was burnt a couple of summers ago. He didn't take any notice, did he? And I'm just mindful too there, Ngāti Pahu, whether you change your claimant area.
Oh, that's not me. It's above me.
Yeah, that's something to note. Tātou is going to Potutu Station area, because as I understand it was Waihua was the boundary.
No idea.
Yeah, it's creeping in there.
Anything else? So can I just have a move and a second to note, and we receive the report, please? Thank you, Henry Y. Thank you, Rick. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Kia ora. Okay, so we're coming down to our last item, which is the minor item. So this morning we had quite a large list. I'm kind of hoping that, given the extent of our conversations today, we may have dealt with quite a few of those. But in saying that, I'll now, so don't forget we need to record our minor items, so please give our secretary the opportunity to catch up with them, please. Wairau, minor items, please. Are you happy we've covered them?
No, didn't we discuss them pre this meeting?
Are you satisfied we've discussed them? Anyway?
Yeah, I've got three. The first being...
Can we just have them recorded for now and then we'll come back to you?
Yep, okay, so the first item is science charges on Māori reservation land. The second is Te Mana o Te Wai workshop. And the third is Māori art forms in the council.
Sure.
Peter Tanga, Māori?
Basically, there's been changes. That's that Taradale unit with Vince Byrne now retiring. Got a new chappie in place, I understand, and it's about the continued access, because we've got to use keys to get in the gates.
Whitebaiting.
Whitebaiting?
Whitebaiting access.
During whitebaiting season
access.
particularly, yeah. Like to strike that conversation up, so we're all aware of it.
Is that an introduction?
That would be great. To our, just to signal that we're probably going to go directly
What
to
is the
him.
process? What is the process on his asks? Is there anything else?
No, that's it.
Whangini Orochi?
Just the point, I think we covered all the points in those action points that we discussed earlier, so just looking up, following up to regards, so I think we covered it all off in this morning.
Thank you. Tomati?
I haven't got anything. This is my first series, so I've enjoyed it.
Relish it while you're doing
Come on, we're returning back to you anyway. Oh, Uncle Bill? Have we covered you guys off?
Bill.
Ka pai. Karolaina? Ka pai.
We've already covered them.
Anyway, thank you.
You're on mute, Uncle Bill.
So the council has the ability to go through section 36 changes, and this topic we'll be looking at for the 2021 year around the science costs on a water take. So each marae would have that, so we're all paying science charges. We have remissions for rates from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council because we're Māori reservation, and obviously that special treaty relationship we have, but that doesn't extend over, the remission doesn't extend over to the science charges of our water takes on our water consents. So what I have experiences over the last year or so, a few different marae in Te Mataua Māui asking, firstly, what are they for? So understanding what makes up those charges. But secondly, is there a remission policy that we can endeavour on that journey to go through in order for those charges to be remiss for Māori reservation land?
So we're looking for some consistency in regards to...
Yeah, and just really asking our staff to bring us a paper, really.
That would be for Jess, Adelaide.
Yep, ka pai. So that was number one. Number two, Te Mana o Te Wai workshops. I believe last term the council, before my time, had a workshop from a Wellington official around Te Mana o Te Wai, what that means. So I think that would be useful for either this committee and the council, but definitely at this committee level, because I believe a lot of our projects that come over our desk don't address the objectives of Te Mana o Te Wai. And I think those conversations need to be brought up again.
I support that.
I know we're not supposed to request things, but that's where it's going because we want some action.
Makes sense.
Second request,
And then the third thing is, you know, if we talk about our taiao warriors, our rangatahi that we want to bring through here, we need to give them a place of belonging to want to sit here. And so I think we can do that in a way that it's mana whenua led, in partnership with the council to help with bringing it to life in terms of the resource to do that. To demonstrate, you know, we've got a stake in the ground here. Our partnership, yeah, and and forever hold your peace, amen, about that. So, kia ora.
That last one might be one that Councillor Ormsby wants to drive at a council level.
Officer driven.
It might just in regards to rangatahi, so we want to build their capacity. Like, you know, for some of our rangatahi, these meetings, they might find it challenging. So, you'd want to put them in a supportive environment where there's not so much politics, but a building, you know what I mean, where they can come and participate with the council and some of the activities they would do, so you can build them up to a level A, because some may find it challenging with some of the kōrero that happens.
This particular motion is just making this physical space feel more like there's Māori involvement and, you know, for me coming in here a lot also, you know, we've got I'm in here a lot, I want to feel like I belong here. So, you know, it's just bringing the kōrero up in this forum. That's an improvement that can be made physically.
And we've got rangatahi we're building now into leaders. So, I could say, we've got 5 rangatahi that we're working with right now. We're trying to develop them, like Zach as well, into leaders. So, you know, our succession planning is how we develop them at an early age, and then they come into that space or they go to university, wherever they're going to go. But then we can say, hey, you know, don't forget the support that we put in through our huriri. So, very supportive of building our rangatahi.
So just anyway, so you're talking about into the physical appearance of this particular building,
from the rangatahi.
there's nothing that really identifies the partnership with mana whenua iwi Māori.
I think too, you know, Chair, one of the biggest things that we could ever do for our rangatahi right now is a kick, it wouldn't be a big thing, is having them engage on the operation of this place. How this place actually ticks. So, you know, if we're doing stuff like that out on the rivers around the cultural stuff, having some of those rangatahi be part of that. Or even, and I'm being tongue-in-cheek here, what does Matua do in this operation? How does it operate for him? So we're getting these young people receiving this mātauranga at an early stage, so when they go back to their marae, they know how to sweep the floor, set the marae up, but they actually understand this sort of talk and how it might look. I think that's that's crucial, not only to have our whānau speak on the marae, but how to grow them from the back to the front.
So taking on Pierre's answer in regards to perhaps it's something you might like to drive through council.
Probably through mana whenua first. And have
Ka
that
pai.
conversation.
And,
Yep.
So,
and we got 5 rangatahi going in the bush, Piri, next week for 3 days if you want to go up and plant with them.
But I'm happy to start that conversation. Yeah.
so is it the rangatahi and then there's you're talking about the presence?
The physical
So
presence, I was just
presence.
There's two kaupapa
a
in here.
website, one somewhere else. Yeah.
We know there's two kaupapa in here, and they're both fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so we know that in the process, you'd like us to try and drive it through here first. We'll work in consultation with you.
Ka pai.
Ka pai, it's my committee will work in consultation with you.
And yeah, and with regard that, I can remember, I'll just go back to Tama, when he engaged with Hastings District Council, and he said to them, where is the evidence that mana whenua are here? So there's paua put up. Where is the evidence that mana whenua are here in the building? I don't see it. When you walk into the Wairoa District Council, you see it. But I don't see it here, and that's something we were discussing, and she said, well, what's your whakaaro? And I said, as long as Ngāti Pāro are the centre of whatever's going to be created, we take toko.
I'd like to say Ngāti Ani Pari Mahu as well. Just,
At a tai whenua level, that would be appropriate. Right?
Right, moving along, Mare. In regards to your one, in regards to access for white baiters.
Oh, I thought I covered off on that, but
I thought
basically,
you did just.
yes, but it would be useful. I'm just trying to look for when our next Māori Standing Committee will be, just to get that introduction. I'm just going through.
I think it's September.
9th of September.
September.
Yeah.
Oh, that's 2 weeks after the whitebait season has started. Too long.
You got to know that way because it's
So your question is?
Having access to the new general, the manager of that unit, and access to the new system now, which used to be keys. So basically, we've had this long-term understanding, which enabled us to have that direct conversation. You've got a new guy, and I understand they're all changing to electronic now. So it was just trying to get an understanding.
Ka pai tēnā, and that'll be for Chris Dolly to give clarification too.
So can you send out the process? Because I know I always get asked
Well,
questions.
that's what we need to refine.
About how you allocate all that stuff, eh? 'Cause I don't know.
So start in terms of current policy and then just see how that changed with the change of people.
Yeah.
Okay, and just to remind council that there was mana whenua and keys, access keys, and there was mana whenua and access keys.
Good reminder. You know, mana whenua with extra set of eyes to support all of this council's work.
And then mana whenua whitebait?
Hey, it's still recording, isn't it?
I think we have dealt with all of our minor items. So we have actually come to the conclusion of our read for today.
You've got a workshop to go.
So,
He said by 3 o'clock has to be finished. We're not going to
so Annalie has got some questions for us, so some part
Can
of
you
it.
just fill in your forms and return it to me, please?
Thank you, Lee.
Oh, and I just want to acknowledge Anna Lee for the the iPad and the training that she provided. How to use Stella, very much appreciated. Thank you, Anna Lee. That was
That's okay.
awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so quite clearly in regards to our workshop, looking at the time, a bit pointless trying to start at this hour.